Hi guys, what's up? So I'm John. I am, for those of you who don't know me, which looks like most of you, I'm CEO of Borne Digital. So we're a digital product studio based in London. And so we kind of help clients build out their digital products, typically from kind of pre-seed right through to Series A. It tends to be our sweet spot. And, we'll build kind of anything from SaaS platforms to mobile apps, full stack. So yeah, that's us in a nutshell. And kind of I sit a little bit more on the product side. I'm not a hardcore product developer or product manager, I should say. So I will do my best to answer any questions that you guys have around product or scaling product or automating or whatever, and just here to help as much of you as possible, really.
Awesome. We're going to get started just by having a quick chat, and you've seen the questions obviously, John, but it was based on some of the LinkedIn content that you put out to make sure that you're prioritizing the right things when it comes to product development. So to get us started, 1 second, I'm just going to add a few more people into the room. Can you just talk about how all the founders in this room, so we're kind of post pre-seed at this stage, people have at least 75k in funding or revenue, how they're making sure that they're solving the right problem?
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting one. So if at your stage you've probably got users, so we're kind of looking at like what our current users' frustrations are and what solutions that they're using to their problem, and we're kind of looking at market trends and competitors. So we need to collect and analyze data to make informed decisions based upon what our user data is coming back from our product. And then we like to kind of try and focus on a niche problem and look at what that niche problem is and then solve that one problem and solve it well. There's not a one size fits all solution to everybody. Recently had conversations with somebody who was looking to build out some kind of like payroll, HR, huge massive platform, and this was kind of pre anything really, and it was kind of like we don't even know where to start with something like this. We don't even know what problem we're solving. Just check he's not on the call. The whole product was so massive that like it was almost impossible to start, and so it's breaking things down into manageable chunks and informing those decisions based upon user data is probably the most important thing I could say at that point.
Cool. So you talk a bit about disproving hypotheses. So I guess that ties in with figuring out exactly what you should be focusing on. So when you talk about disproving a hypothesis, can you give an example of how you might go about doing that? Yeah,
I mean, so proving and disproving, they're kind of one of the same thing. And you kind of have to accept that as no matter how much research you do, a lot of this is a theoretical solution to a human problem. And we hope that it's going to result in business success. But the hypotheses has to have, it needs to be kind of well informed. So, it goes back to all of this is kind of data focused, and apologies if there's repetition in some of these like answers or in what I'm saying, but, product development, or at least good product development, is very data driven, okay, and it's very user centric and data driven. So the hypothesis itself needs to be very well informed. Crap in equals crap out, excuse my French, but so in order to kind of disprove a hypothesis or even prove it, it's the same thing. It needs to be like well informed, and we need to try and do it with as minimal effort as possible. So could that be, for instance, an A/B test on a landing page, something simple as that, or perhaps we're using one payment processor and we wonder whether that's kind of restricting users on the, like maybe people are dropping off at the payment flow. And we're wondering whether that was a barrier because maybe we're not using like the right payment processor or something like that. So, maybe post checkout, we could run just a quick pop-up saying, was this payment processor the right payment processor for you? Did you have to kind of create an account, or would you like us to use an additional payment processor? It's a one-click button. and you've kind of disproved or proved your hypotheses that maybe we need to like run multiple payment processes to allow kind of easier transaction flow through the checkout process. So you know, you can run kind of A/B tests as well, like say on a landing page. Tools that we've used in the past for that are things like Crazy Egg or Optimizely, to kind of run different landing pages that you can direct traffic to, monitor what the user behavior is during that, and then look at the outcomes, and then what kind of whether that's proved your hypotheses of, okay, our marketing messages is wrong on our landing page, therefore we need to kind of change that to something more friendly or something more direct with a clearer call to action. So, you know, those are a couple of ways that you can look at doing something like that. The goal being really is that you want to be able to do it with as minimal effort as possible, but with, you know, real user data to drive the hypotheses in the first place. It can't just be sort of hunch or gut based.
So you're saying, like, in order to get to the hypothesis part, you're looking at data, then you build a hypothesis, then you use data again afterwards to measure whether it's consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, obviously you're going to have product teams, and then you know, a product is going to be, you know, founder driven depending on where you're at your stage of growth, and a founder is always going to have to go with their gut at some point, and probably get onto that later in some of the questions. But it can't just be sort of, I had an idea down the pub on a whim. You know, a lot of it has to be kind of real user data driven certainly at the stage that people are at on this call, when we're kind of trying to really, you know, validate a hypothesis or an idea or a new extension to an existing product.
So what data do you think the founders should be tracking or looking at right now to then formulate a hypothesis to test?
Well, for instance, you know, retention, you know, try not to look at vanity metrics. You know, so engagement and retention are the big ones, for kind of a, you know, SaaS-based startups or any kind of, you know, tech startup using a product. You know, retention and engagement are the big ones. So how long are people spending on the platform? What are they doing when they're there? How long are they staying there, and where are they dropping off? Just as importantly, you know, what are the friction points? You know, so we look at things like heat maps and stuff like that to sort of see where people are clicking on what they're doing. And, you know, so you'll have a hunch. So a hypothesis would start with a hunch and kind of say, we feel like our sign-up flow might be broken. We're driving traffic using Google Ads, for want of a better thing, and the conversions just aren't, the numbers just aren't there. You know, we're not converting as many people as we should be. So how can we optimize that conversion? And our hypothesis is that, you know, our message or the sign up flow on our landing page is wrong. So we're asking people to do too many things before we get them into our product. So in order to kind of move that on, then we need to kind of A/B test, or, you know, test against a different sign up flow, for instance.
Yeah. Is there any like tests that you can run to get the data that you need to do another test? Just looking at Michael's comment that came in on the chat about only having minimal data sets at this point to start with, especially if you're you've built the product but you haven't got it out in the market yet, so you've got
like I said, I mean, it depends on the stage of where you're at. So I didn't see Michael's comment, sorry, there's but what was the specific comment?
Just that the problem that some of the people on this call might have is that they've got minimal data sets around which to form the hypothesis in the first place.
Sure, yeah. And yeah, that's an interesting one, and then you may have to kind of rely on your gut. But at the same time, you know, I've known founders who've like run tests using like a type form and spending 30 quid on like a Google ad spend, and like, so setting up a launching page, running a type form, running some Google ads based on keywords that are relevant to what their product does, and then getting people to, you know, fill out the data based on that type form. And that, you know, it's a very quick but very crude way of proving or disproving like a hypothesis, you know. And that's kind of also more of a kind of a product validation point as much as anything. But at the same time, that could be something that you can push out to your, existing users. I mean, I don't know where Michael is in terms of his journey or whatever, but reaching out, even if you've got a small subset of users, you can reach out to them direct. It's the best way.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. So for the next question, there's you can obviously map out using data, heat maps of where people are clicking on your website, or whether you've got churn when you get to payments and that kind of thing. But you've also got users which you should be speaking to on a weekly basis anyway, to inform your product development and your roadmap. And one of the things that we do as part of this program is ask people to speak to users every week and report on how many conversations they had and what the feedback from those conversations were. How do you advise that the founders extrapolate the most value when they have 10-15 minutes with a user? How do you form the questions to make sure that you're asking the right questions to get the most amount of data, I guess, out of those users so that you're making the right decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, I mean, it's good to have an objective in mind as to what you want out of it, but at the same time, I think you need to ask open-ended questions. So really try and avoid yes or no answers, and let the person who's being interviewed talk. So they call it sort of a 5 whys to wisdom or something like that. And ask people why they took a specific action, for instance, or why they're having a specific friction point with a particular feature. So why did you not do this, or why did you do this, or what drove you to cancel your subscription, or what drove you to sign up, and just let them talk. So listen as much as you do. Don't talk to them and don't make assumptions. So because a lot of the time you're going to be really surprised about what people tell you. Think, oh my god, because in your mind as a founder, being so close to a product, you're kind of looking at it through quite a sort of this lens like this, and it's really difficult to kind of objectively look at it from kind of a user's perspective sometimes, and you'll be really amazed at some of the stuff that comes back from users in terms of oh wow, I really didn't think about that. And just kind of keep an open mind, I guess, and don't sort of try not to lead the conversation too much down a point that you think it needs to go down, and just let them talk, because a lot of the time it can be quite eye-opening. I mean, you're going to get your good users and bad users, and not every piece of user feedback is, should we say, correct or useful, but it's still a data point that you can work with. But ultimately ask them why they were frustrated with a feature or why they took a specific action, and then avoid like yes or no questions, basically.
Yeah, we did a session for a previous cohort on a similar topic, and one of the things that came out of it, there was a story which, if you went through our overalls cohort, you would have heard me say there, but someone was doing some user feedback on the iPhone, and they all sat a group of people down and did a roundtable discussion. They were like, would you want the pink one, the orange one, the green one, the red one, white or black? And then everyone was like, yeah, I'd have the orange one, I'd have the pink one. And then at the end of the roundtable, they said to all of the people that attended, okay, as a thank you gift, you get to take an iPhone home with you as a free gift. And then they all went and grabbed the white and black iPhones, and everybody left all the colourful ones, which was totally different to what they just said in their user feedback. Yeah. And when we were chatting to these kind of custom insight experts about it, they said that if you ask people what they think they're going to do in the future, they think aspirationally about the kind of person they would like to be. So they'll be like, I want to be the kind of person that gets the orange iPhone, but I'm not. I'm always the person that goes and just gets the standard black iPhone when it actually comes to the decision point. And so the best thing to do is always ask people about their past behaviors rather than putting themselves into this aspirational future persona, which actually might not be accurate. And then you're learning what they're actually like, and you can extrapolate from there, rather than asking them all these questions about the future, which might actually not be correct, and it doesn't help inform your decision. So
yeah,
that might
exactly.
be helpful. I don't know if you've ever heard anything like that, John, but
I haven't, but I mean, that kind of goes a little bit back to sort of more of the like, don't be afraid to ask why, as opposed to you know, like saying, would you be interested if we added XYZ feature? Because they could just go, yeah, sounds good, you know, and that's not really like a useful data point for you to like take back to kind of your product roadmap. A more interesting data point would be, well, I kind of cancelled the sign up flow because I was getting bored of the millionth question that you asked me, or, you know, whatever that might be. But, you know, asking the questions of why, as opposed to would you like this, I think is a much more useful data point for you to have, because, you know, most people, like you say, will be maybe aspirational or just kind of maybe non-confrontational as well in their nature. So, you know, you could say, would this feature make your life easier? And a lot of people could just say, yeah, sure, sounds great, you know, go build it for me. Whereas we're still trying to figure out pain points about, you know, previous experiences to try and validate ideas that we've probably already got in our head anyway as founders, you know. And as a founder, you're going to have, like, probably, I'm guessing, 1,000,001 features, like as long as your arm, that you want to kind of add to your roadmap. So, you know, a useful thing of this kind of the interviews is actually just kind of like try and refine that roadmap and make informed decisions about what's going into my roadmap and then where it sits in terms of the priority.
Yeah, because I guess the other issues with the user feedback that we've heard is that, kind of a bit like the non-confrontational thing, people want to make you happy as the person asking the question, so they want to give you the answer that they think is the right answer. So you can't give away, you almost, I know you said go in with an objective, but you can't let them know what you want the answer to be, because then they'll just tell you that. And I guess by asking why, rather than them just being like, if we say, shall we add this feature, and they go, yeah, it's because they think that you want to add that feature. Correct. And it's like validating you. But if you say why, then it actually forces them to think more about whether it will be useful to them. Someone's put in the chat about the kind of the mum test, and what if they said what they wanted, it would be a faster horse Ford problem. Do you have any tips for how you move away from the fact that users might not actually know what they want?
In what context? Sorry, like where are we at in terms of users not knowing what they want? As in what they want in terms of future product iteration, or what they want because they didn't sign up to my product, or they didn't stay with my product, or do you know what I
guess
mean?
It's more like the innovation. So if you're trying to form an innovation around a customer need, and you're asking the customers what they need, but they don't know what I need because it doesn't exist yet.
And yeah, that's great. I mean, because that's probably a good position to be in, though, frankly, because you can base your product on a specific pain point. And so if they don't know what they need because it doesn't exist yet, then you could ask, well, I suppose I wouldn't ask them if they got everything they needed from the thing, because again, they might say yes. But you could ask them, is there a way that we could have improved your experience? Or, you know, are you entirely happy with the tool? What else could we do to enhance your experience with our tool? Did you enjoy using a particular feature? Why did you interact with this particular feature and not another feature, for instance? So, you know, we've just added chat. Was there a reason why you're not really using the chat? Is this useful to you or not? And so, yeah, I guess asking whys and trying to steer a conversation down that line is probably a way to go on that one.
Yeah. Anthony mentioned this in last week's talk as well, but like something on the landing page that just says, why are you here? So if there's multiple reasons why people might land on your page, you kind of figure out what the main reason is, and then you know how to steer your messaging to what the majority of people want.
Well, again, it depends what they've searched for to land on your landing page as well. So you've got to kind of go back to, if you're running, say, an ads campaign, and then like you're running an ads campaign for, I don't know, HR platform tools, and they're landing for that, and then they're kind of getting frustrated because you're not giving them what they want, then you've got a slightly bigger problem. But yeah, I think it's kind of looking at that landing page experience, but what did they land on the landing, how are you getting them there as well, I guess. Yeah.
So let's say the stage of the founders, the majority of them here will have tested an MVP. They've got a product on the market, or they maybe had a beta group of people using an MVP version of the product, and then with the fundraise, they're looking to launch it to the wider market. So a lot of the product that's been built might be the very MVP way of doing it, so a bit more clunky, time consuming, that kind of thing. Do you have any tips for, like, simple tips for automating particular parts of different processes to free up time?
Simple tips. It depends what kind of processes we're talking about, and like how many people they have on board, whether it's a HR process or more about kind of like the product development side of things. Like, for instance, we were just talking about the like running ad campaigns and like marketing, sales and marketing. That's one that quite often gets put on automation quite early on as a quick win. So perhaps automating a landing page, using the all-consuming AI that everybody seems to be talking about, putting together a decent chatbot to maybe capture some lead capture forms or something like that. So you could run Google ads, generate landing page, take people to a chatbot, run a succession of questions, and then push them through to, say, a automated email that kind of follows up with them and then gets them like a Calendly booking form. So you sort of almost semi-automating like a product demo, for instance, with somebody. So that could be one way of sort of building out your beta user base, for instance. So I could run some ads, take people to a landing page, have them interact with a chatbot or a type form or something or other, generate an automated email that then gets them to book a product demo with me in my Calendly. Could be quite an easy way of considerable automating like your sales and marketing process. If you're growing your team, HR tools and HR systems are great. We use Kin. Well, they've just been acquired, actually. They're called something else now. But Kin for sort of your employee onboarding, payroll, doing all of that sort of stuff, like holiday time management for your employees as well, is quite a good one to automate quite early on for fairly little expense. But those sort of things are just literally quite mundane tasks that perhaps you wouldn't think about as a founder because you're head down kind of building stuff and everything. But if you start onboarding employees, to give employees, especially like in an early stage startup, a more kind of rounded experience, automating those tasks using HR platforms and things like that is quite a good way of sort of providing them with a little bit more of a sort of more, I don't know, larger corporate feel to the organization rather than just a scrappy startup. Yeah. Okay. Back to product. In terms of product roadmap, so small teams trying to figure out the best use of their time. What's best practice for the roadmap in terms of splitting time between product discovery and delivering on things that are already on your roadmap, or aligning with vision and strategy versus responding to customers' needs that are coming in saying, we want this, we want that? Like, there's a lot of like competing things for your attention. So what do you think is best practice? It's hard, and like it's a really difficult one to answer, because I'm going to try my best, but as a founder, obviously, especially at the stage that a lot of the people on this call will be, you know, they're really embedded in it, and you are kind of the product person is generally the founder still. You know, it's only when you kind of get to raising significant funds where perhaps you start to move away from that kind of thing, and you kind of let go of the reins, and then it becomes kind of, you bring in, say, a head of product or something like that. So I think at this stage is really trying to balance out prioritizing between sort of effort required versus the value that new feature might bring. So whether it's coming from me as a founder of like, this is my roadmap, and you know, this is the features that I want, and then I'm talking to users and I'm pulling in their kind of features as well, and we're kind of validating concepts using user feedback, but also via our interviews, we've kind of got ourselves a few new user stories as a result of kind of conversations we've had with our users. So then that goes into it. It doesn't mean that a user story that's come from a user interview necessarily gets prioritized above what I consider as part of my founder mission, my founder roadmap. So you need a board. You definitely need a board, you know, and just talking basics, you know, something like Trello, for instance, is really great. You know, that's what we use. It's a simple tool, and you know, if you're fairly new to product management, Trello is a really good one. It's a visual aid, and you can kind of have your sort of now, next, and then future as part of your roadmap. And then to kind of define how you prioritize that, there's tons of different methods, and not one is right or wrong. A popular one is what's called kind of the RICE method, which is reach, impact, confidence, and effort. So what's the reach of this new feature? What impact will it have on our product? How confident are we that it's actually going to impact our product? And then again, it goes back to the effort. What's the effort required? So an example of, say, a feature that could be like a really high priority, or one that you would sort of put straight to the top, or like an example of this would be, we talked about it earlier, is like a landing page or a sign up experience. So we're seeing tons of people getting to our landing page, we're getting good traffic, and they're going through the first stage of sign up, and then they're just aborting. So we've clearly got a sign up problem. And then who's that going to impact? Well, nearly everybody. And then what's the effort required to kind of do a redesigned sign up flow? You know, it's generally front end specific, so it's a bit of design and then a bit of front end development in order to kind of redo that sign up flow. So the effort versus the potential impact of kind of, I don't know, 20% more conversions or whatever it might be is huge. So that would be therefore that would go right to the top of my list in terms of you know, fixing problems. Dark mode, do we need dark mode? Not really. So it's very much a nice to have. So then that's going kind of more into the impact of that is fairly minimal in terms of how that's going to impact my product. So reach, impact, confidence, effort. Just try your best to balance what the effort required versus the output value is going to be in order to kind of prioritize that roadmap. And then update it all the time, you know, stick it on Trello every time you have a user interview, every time you have a conversation with other stakeholders or your development team or whoever it might be. Constantly assess it. It's a living, breathing thing, much like the software is, you know, and the product is kind of I say this all the time, but the product is kind of it's a journey, it's not a destination. It constantly evolves, and so your roadmap should evolve with it.
How do you feel about the whole kind of building in public movement? And you know, Monzo were they were front runners when it came to constantly updating people about what their plans were, and then getting feedback and then iterating. Do you think that's useful?
Yeah, you know, it works for some people, it works for others. One thing I hope nobody's in stealth mode here. I'm not a huge fan of the stealth mode startup thing. So I'm not like, wow, build in public, got to do build in public. I like it. I prefer the term user-driven development as opposed to build in public. So whether you're kind of sharing your roadmap publicly on your page, that's great. I don't see that as like a prerequisite, to be honest, because I do think requirements can change, and especially in the early days, they can change pretty swiftly. And actually, you find that kind of 9 out of 10 startups will actually pivot to an almost entirely different business model post launch anyway. So I think at this stage, having your product roadmap in public is, I don't know, it's kind of cool to do it at the moment, but whether it's a necessity or not, I'm not sure. No.
Okay. And kind of last question from me, and then we'll move to audience Q&A. So anyone got any questions for John, you can raise your hand and ask directly, or put anything that you would like into the chat as well. What mistakes do you see founders regularly making when it comes to product development?
So on the product side, there's a few. Honestly speaking, the main one is having too many features. Like it's such a common theme, and I totally get it, because we've built our in-house products ourselves as well, and it's really difficult to kind of take a step back. But going back to your problem and your problem solution thing, and what problem we're solving and who's it for and all that kind of stuff, you've got to just try and do one thing and do it well, because what happens then, if you kind of overload on features, A, you're spending more money, B, you're taking longer to launch, and C, you're taking longer to ultimately validate your idea. So it has a massive knock-on effect. And then what happens is, because we end up building a bit of a monster, the amount of kind of room for errors grows and grows and grows as well, because the tech becomes more complex. So like the testing cycles become larger as well. So every time we kind of add a new feature, and we've got to keep testing and then do regression testing and test the rest of the product at the same time. So, and you end up like almost never launching. And so then the founder starts getting launch anxiety, which is another thing that we see, which is like, my product's got bugs in it and stuff like that. And in the early days, it probably will have bugs, and it's always going to have bugs. So don't like sort of expect perfection, or don't reach for perfection before you launch. Just launch it, get it out there, and start learning and start iterating. I'm assuming everybody on this call will have kind of done their market research and looked into competitors, and has actually kind of Googled their idea and whether competitors exist, because we have had people come to us who like, oh no, I haven't got any competitors at all, and like a really quick Google search tells you that they've got quite a few. But assuming we're quite far beyond that, I think it's kind of, don't focus on vanity metrics as well. So like downloads, sign-ups are nice, but like it's better to have 1,000 engaged, retained, active users than 10,000 users who never use your product, ones that you've just bought. And actually, I'm not a VC investor, but we do speak to VCs and stuff like that quite a lot. And those are the kind of metrics that, as you kind of go subsequent raises and things like that, those are the things that people are really going to be interested in, is kind of like, have you got retained users? Have you got active users? As opposed to, we've just gone and bought 10,000 users from Google, but none of them actually use our product. That's not showing any kind of signs of growth at all.
Yeah. Michael.
Hello. Yes, John, thank you for the reminder about rice. That is, I think, a useful way of thinking about these things. So that was very useful. I would question, though, this reliance. At one point in your talk, you were talking about plugging in existing components, and you used the example of Google AdWords, etc., and talking to a chatbot, etc. My feeling about that is that many of these digital mechanisms are kind of showing their age at this point. And if we're trying to design new user interfaces, then plugging in existing older components ain't a great way of discovering what are the best new paradigms around user interaction.
Sure. And was it a question?
There isn't a question. There isn't a question. It's just a comment. I can ask a question if you like. How do you feel?
No. It's an interesting comment. I mean, I guess Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I mean, I'm not a kind of automation expert. As I said, that's slightly probably on the more the marketing side of things, and we're more product dev and building. But yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Okay. Question from Joe that came in on the chat. Is kind of questioning like how to not treat clients as guinea pigs. So obviously one of the things that you want to do, especially if you've got big enterprise clients, is you want them to trust you and you want them to believe that you have the right product and the right team to deliver a solution to them. But if you keep asking them questions, then it looks like you don't really know what product you've got yet. So how do you balance the like user insights with building trust with the people that you're trying to sell to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so I guess the user insights that we're garnering are generally from people that we've already sold to, though. So these are people that are already using our product. I generally wouldn't be getting user insights from people who aren't using our product, unless there's kind of if you're talking specifically from kind of the enterprise level clients, then I think then it's a case of founders building up a more personal relationship with their kind of the person that they're dealing with on the enterprise level. I think they're not just then a user, they're a client. If that's how you're looking at them, if you're selling into enterprise, then yes, it's a user interview, but at the same time, I think you really need to kind of treat them as a client and actually kind of figure out, if they're enterprise level, then they're going right to the top of the list in terms of your product development. So I think it becomes a slightly different conversation rather than just sort of, I wouldn't be sending an enterprise level client a type form for them to fill in, to be honest. I think that it's more kind of an open conversation about, are we kind of meeting their expectations and fulfilling their needs?
Yeah. Joe, I don't know if you want to come on and explain anything more. Just mentioned in the chat while you were talking. Do you want to explain it?
Yeah, I think it's more during the onboarding period where you're sort of in that stage where you're giving them some sense of your product and they're not quite, sort of they're in the process of signing up or onboarding, or you've got an integration to do, etc. I think it's at that point that we're seeing the greatest risk, where they start to get slightly wobbly if you're asking them questions that don't quite have your documentation to the your README stuff to the standard that maybe they might normally see, or I think the concern is, how do we avoid that? Surely we shouldn't be asking them too many questions at that stage, but we still so I just wondered if you've got any advice around it, because it's inevitable that we are going to have questions, because we haven't done that a huge number of times.
Fake it till you make it, Jay.
Yeah, I think our commercial team are really good at that. Our tech team, if they're asked a question, are not quite so good at that.
I mean, this is getting into kind of more sales territory, I think, which is great. But I think you're gonna lose people in that process, though, to be honest. And that is kind of a natural thing, and if and a lot of these coaches and all that talk about rejection and all this sort of stuff all the time, and it will happen, and you will get knockbacks, and you'll get people kind of getting cold feet in at the last hurdle, because we get it all the time as an agency as well. People kind of like keen to do business with us, and then it falls apart towards the thing, and it's not necessarily something that you may have done. It could be something that's changed internally their side as well. So I think if it happens, you just have to try and use the experience as another data point, and try and figure out if they didn't sign up, find out why. If they're prepared to go through why, and then you've got a data point to address for next time. But also just be confident in your messaging. I mean, the fact that if you're confident in the problem that you're solving, then some of the kind of the legalities and the T's and C's around it should just kind of slot in, I think. Just have confidence in what you're building. You're having that conversation in the first place, so there's clearly an interest there. So just be confident with it.
Yeah, it's just being careful not to make them feel like they're a guinea pig in any way. That I think, no clients like to think that they're early in your process, do they? That's the challenge.
Well, it depends on the client, to be honest. Some do with some SaaS products, because some people like to think that they're sort of, the early adopters, the pioneers and stuff like that. And, it depends on your product. I don't think your product or because a lot of this can be very product specific, but, a lot of people do like to be an early adopter, an early adopter's discount, come on with us with the journey, all of that kind of stuff. So it really depends on what you're selling and who you're selling it to as well, to be honest. So and I think it sounds like for you, perhaps tailoring your messaging to be a little bit more I don't know, reassuring and confidence building might be the way to do it. And just not so much build in public and
Thank you.
massive great beta banner across your website or whatever.
No, we don't do that. Okay, thank you.
It does depend, doesn't it? Like, I used to work for a scale up, and we had so at the beginning it was founder-led sales, and when it was just a startup, and because it was enterprise, they were selling to enterprise, the founder would make all of these small little product tweaks specifically for the their customer, because they really wanted them. So they were like, I want my logo in the top left, not the top right. And they'd be like, okay, cool, we'll do that. And then it came to the point where they were getting bigger customers, bigger tickets, their salespeople, and then the people that were there right at the beginning, they always want to deal with the founder. And even though they're at the value of the contract is 10% what the future value was, and then whenever there was a product update, their little tweak on the product always got lost, and then their logo ended up on the right hand side, not the left hand side, and then they complain about it. And so I think you have to be quite smart at the beginning when you're thinking about how you're going to deal with these clients, so that when you end up, you're not the person that's dealing with them, or in the future, you're not going to be able to do individualized tweaks, and it's actually going to impact your product development. Like, you need to figure out what the plan is, I think, at this point, because otherwise you end up really bending over backwards for them, which maybe you need to do, but then pissing them off in the long run at the same time, and costing yourself loads of time and effort.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have some, we've had similar problems in the past as well, because if we're founder-led sales, where we overpromise to clients, and then they sort of buy a specific solution that's maybe founder-driven and stuff like that, and then, like you say, it can have kind of a trickle-down, top-down effect. So you have to be careful.
So just think about your future self would be my tip, and how you want the business to run then, and make sure that what you're doing now is scalable, even though you're trying to win new clients at the same time. Question from David in the chat. What do you think are the best digital platforms for gathering user feedback if you're looking to get kind of volume of users, so 50 to 100K?
Google Forms is very good. And are we talking about user feedback on or just user feedback in general? So user feedback for my product that we've developed.
David, I don't know if you want to jump in. I'm guessing you mean just, are you talking about people like looking at your website and where they're landing, or are you talking about like doing a customer interview?
It's could be a lot, actually. And I think the one Sean shared around there, Ballpark HQ, looks pretty good, because it offers a variety of ways, so you can test your Figma designs. So if we do a product feature and you design it on there, we can share it on Figma. Then that's an initial view of that. Would actually put us further ahead than where we're at currently. So just stuff like that is useful. But I think in a sort of visionary way forward, it's almost like, how could I create a forum that had the early users as pioneers, really, and just have more of a sort of conversational dynamic. What do we think about this latest feature, or voting on features almost? So it's almost, I mean, one of the tips that I had was to create a Facebook group, but I was a bit like, ooh, it feels a bit not quite right for what I'm wanting to do. But it's just a basic software question, really, because you put that into Google and it comes up with, here's our top 10 from Tech Radar, So I was just wondering if you were using anything that's practically, really useful for high volume.
I actually think Typeform is really great for this sort of thing, to be honest, because you can spin stuff up pretty quickly using a Typeform, and that will kind of get you data fairly quickly. That's what we've used in the past for clients, and then kind of no-code tools for kind of developing a sub page where you can do that. I don't think your idea about the Facebook group is too bad, actually. I think that's an all right idea, if you're comfortable with the build in public thing, because you're getting people talking about your product as well, which can only be a good thing.
And I suppose it's horses for courses as well. We could put some of the you wouldn't not like this, so put that in Facebook, right? And then some of the other stuff we're not too sure about, we could Typeform it or something. But,
yes.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks, John.
Typeform is great though. Honestly, it's quick and you can spin it up super fast, and I think it's a very flexible tool as well. Airtable as well along that route. I know a lot of people who used Airtable for similar things.
Great. Adam, do you want to ask your question? Then I'll go to Tim's in the chat.
Yeah, thanks, Bertie. It's more of a comment than a question, just on what John was saying about user-driven development and the feedback that you get. Something that we've done with our clients is, as part of the service side, is we have what we call office hours. So we're quite unique in that we have sort of different types of end user, that we have the admin of a mentorship program, and then you have the end user who participate in the mentorship program. And the office hours is literally a 30-minute drop-in at various stages throughout a program, where the end user and the admin are there as well as us, so that they can give us direct feedback on either the program formation or the actual platform technical bits. And that's been really useful for us, because we've seen sort of some really obvious bits and pieces, like I couldn't find this button, and it's like, oh, it's because it's all the same colors as everything else, we just change it. It's like and you can also then help your roadmap. They say, I could have really done with this, or we could do with this integration. So you start looking into it, and it's just such a simple format, but it's done amazing things for us, because you sort of got every touch point. You've got the end user, you've got the administrator, you've got ourselves, client, you've sort of got everyone in the room, and it's just a drop-in session. So I just wanted to throw that in there because other people might find it useful.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's really cool.
Another thing is just like, if you just want a bit of user for that kind of thing, like, oh, I didn't realize that you could press that button because it doesn't look like it's pressable, or it didn't stand out from all the other buttons, that kind of stuff. This is what this community is great for. There's a bunch of people that are building seed stage businesses, and Margaret Ann and myself were always around if you want to show us your product or show us your landing page and just get some honest feedback in terms of what we think and where we would go next, or you just want us to like talk through our experience of being onboarded into something. But also everybody else in this group, I'm sure, will offer some of their time to take themselves through one of your processes and just speak honestly about how they're reacting to it, because everybody's in the same boat. So post anything on the WhatsApp group or on the platform if you want feedback or you want people to test anything. The question from Tim. So we have a basic MVP with the core elements of our proposition, but what are your thoughts on a mock-up test for features with a sample of users ahead of starting to build out the full feature set of the full product?
Yeah, it's a good question. Depends how you're defining a mock-up test. You're actually going to code that mock-up test and launch it to a few new features, and if so, what you're coding it in, or is the mock-up test going to be a Figma file that you're going to share with a few users? It depends.
Tim,
really.
can you shed some extra light?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Purdy. Sorry, I'm bunged up with a cold. So the MVP, we don't want to spend any more money on that, really. Yeah, we've kind of taken it as far as we want to take it. But in looking at the full feature platform, and your comment about prioritizing features, I wonder, how useful it would be for us to kind of build something up we could then use with a sample of users. and get their response and get them to, help us in the prioritization process, which, in terms of tools, I don't know what that would be. My impression would be it needs to be kind of coded up to a point, but not fully kind of functional.
Yeah, so it sounds like then it sounds like if you're going to have to code it, then you have to have a conversation with yourselves about that kind of the value out versus input in question, so I don't know how much a user is to you in terms of the end user value, or what the new feature, how much extra revenue that's going to generate, and then how you're developing it, whether you're developing in-house or using an external partner, and how much that's going to cost you to do. But I think that would be the first place to start with that. But then I guess I would ask why you're going straight into sort of building this new tool for people prior to, or have you already validated that they actually want this new tool?
Yeah, so we validated it. It's really around prioritization. What are the most valuable elements that they would want to see, and therefore give us the greatest kind of traction early. And it's finding a way of assessing that with a sample group of either beta users, or without actually starting the full-blown development program and then ending up kind of down the wrong track, or down a slower track than we could have been on.
Yeah, so then it's kind of that new feature, then you have to break that down and into subsets of that feature and break it down into as smaller tasks as possible, realistically, and then the one that kind of moves the needle along first gets prioritized, so the sooner you get it into those users' hands, the better, essentially. So if it is whatever that new feature is, if you can break that new feature down into like core tasks that actually achieve that deliverable, then that's what goes into it first. And then beyond that, then you've got kind of your nice to have. So you've got your sort of should haves, could haves, must haves, nice to haves, and that's kind of more along what's called the Moscow method, where you're kind of defining your product roadmap. But yeah, I guess if you've already validated it, then you have to then kind of decide what's the quickest way that gets us to that new feature, and then getting it in our users' hands, and then starting to get that ROI. But chop out anything that doesn't actually align with that. Be ruthless.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, John.
We've got about 5-6 minutes left. There's no more questions, but I just thought, given that some people have just shared their own advice with the group, or things that they've done which have been helpful to them, maybe we should use this additional 5 minutes just for that. So I'd love anyone that has used a particular product, or they've done a particular insight interview, or there's something that's really worked well for them that they think would be useful for the rest of the cohort. Can you just share it, and we'll just do some kind of peer-to-peer actionable useful stuff. Jen.
I can jump in quickly.
Oh, sorry, was that me, or did I jump?
Sorry, Jen, go for it. It's my hand.
Sorry. The thing that is really kind of an uncool thing to do, but has really helped us, is process mapping. So we use Miro, and when we're going through any sign-on journeys, or when we want anybody to go through the product and to map out the UX, having using Moscow and other such things is super helpful in terms of defining the features. But we've also, through doing the process mapping, that's also changed how we've done the features, and it's allowed us to really strip the MVP right back. But process mapping, I know, isn't very cool, but it's been the one thing that's really differentiated where we were and where we are now.
Good to know, thank you. Ajit?
Hi, this is in regards to gathering user insights. So early on in my journey of getting user insights, like basically I would have my users telling good things, and they would feel a bit shy telling things that were unpleasant. Then I realized that I need to explicitly give them permission to trash the product. So when I realized the moment I make it okay for them to say that, okay, you're allowed to trash things that you didn't like, then I would start getting all the useful stuff. So yeah, so basically that worked for me well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I was actually going to mention that earlier. Like, even if it makes them feel uncomfortable, if you specifically either say to them, I want you to be like really honest, or your questions are, what do you not like? Then you're giving them permission. I don't know if that's how you did it, but you actually
I would make it very, even if I ask them what you didn't like, then they would they would be a bit shy, saying that, okay, basically if I say this and, basically they may offend. I would tell them very explicitly that the entire purpose of this feedback call is to, as much as to understand what you like, as to understand what you didn't like. So you have 100% permission to tell me whatever you didn't like.
Yeah.
So so just about making it more explicit and giving them the permission.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Thank you. Francisco.
Just a quick one from me. John, thank you for all the insights. I find that, like Ashley, I think, said about Miro, we use Scully Draw to create our big sort of roadmap. It's easier to move things around, and we use Trello for actually the sort of the delivery roadmap when we set in stones. In terms of user feedback, we baked in very early in our apps a way for users to give us some feedback at the end of every exercise. So for context, sort of fitness sort of app. So at the end of the exercise, it's a passive sort of give us some feedback. And that has been quite useful to be able to understand what users expected at the end of the exercise in terms of stats or features. And then we break the ice by actually going and speak to our users and meet them on site, because obviously we know when they practice and when they train, when the games are. So we have a presence on site every now and then, and that breaks the ice a bit more for a non-digital savvy sort of crowd, which are sort of sports coaches per se.
Yeah, really good.
That's really cool.
Thanks. Michael.
Yeah, I'll keep it really quick. One of the things that I like to do and practiced over the years is to try not to get the product in front of people too early. And actually to concentrate on understanding the context of their lives, where you think your product is going to fit, and just don't show them anything for a long time, as long as you possibly can, because I think that it builds the design thinking without biasing the reaction to the thing that is put in front of people.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you, Michael. And Daniel.
Hello. Yeah, I was going to say definitely the open-ended questions and all the sort of mum test stuff, but one that, and I just totally borrowed this from Daphne Tideman, who's like a big growth person. If you don't follow, I recommend it. But if you record them and you sort of turn them into all of the users' interviews, and then you turn them into essentially internal podcasts, so you've always just got an easy place to turn to if you're thinking about something or you're trying to run something down. You've just got a really easy like reservoir of all these user interviews that you can just crack on and listen to, and then okay, actually I remember when they said exactly that, and it's just a really useful way and a different way of processing the same information.
I really like that idea as well. Cool. John, any final words from you based on those few tidbits?
No, I mean I loved, I think it was Francisco's thing that he said about the in-app experience, because that goes back to the thing that I was saying earlier about the kind of like post, when after someone's done something, so they've completed the action that you kind of wanted them to complete, but then after they've done that, ask them about the experience that they had with that experience. And it could just be a simple, it's 2 boxes, or yes, no, or great, bad, whatever, and you look at sort of some of the more high performing apps. I mean, it's pretty impressive that Francisco's doing that. I don't know what his stage is at, but anyway, it's impressive regardless. I just really like that kind of like in-app experience, especially with apps where it's a very quick interaction, very quick touch point. You can very quickly get some, top level data from somebody with fairly minimal effort, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, I thought that was a super cool one.
Yeah, it just opens up the conversation sometimes when people say, I'm not sure about this, and is enough. So
not sure, take them to a landing page with a type form on it or something like
exactly,
that, that's a really cool way to, get some free product development out of somebody.
Yeah, and the more data you have, I kind of guess this takes us back to the beginning, but the more data you have, the more informed you are with your product development. And obviously a big part of the program that we're doing is to get people to talk to users all the time. And the reason why is because you can make better decisions. So that's been really useful. Thank you so much, John. Thanks everyone else for contributing as well. We are back again on Wednesday at 2 p.m. So we will see you there. We'll make this available as a replay on YouTube, and we'll write up a blog as always. And any questions you have, myself and Emma will stick around for a couple of minutes now, but otherwise we will bid you farewell.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, John.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.